Welcome back to No More Waffle. We are joined once again for his third and final piece with us by Rowan Waller, the wonderful Rowan Waller. As always, if you've been hiding for the last couple of weeks, I'll let Rowan introduce himself for the last time, and then we're going to get straight into it. So Rowan, welcome again.
Thank you for having me. My name is Rowan Waller. I have a business called The Property Pen. I produce written content for estate agents and letting agents, so blog content, that sort of thing. But the difference is that I've come at that from having had a background in a state agency for 20 years leading up to that point.
And so, as with all our guests, fantastic experience, and they're going to help us marry the two worlds of consumer perception versus what actually happens in the property industry. Because I think if we can join those two up, make a huge difference to a lot of lives. So, straight into the big question. If you could change one thing about how a state agency operates, not for agents, but for people buying, selling, renting, letting, what would it be and why?
So what I'm going to say is it's an impossible answer. You can't do this. But actually it would be to take the business out of a state agency so that these estate agents have no commercial interest anymore.
Okay, give us a bit more.
So I think that the problem that estate agents have is that we're commercial operators. We're trying to make profit, because if we don't make profit, we die. And that can lead to conflicts of interest and malpractice. We touched on it in the last episode. And I don't think that we should actually give up being businesses. So I don't agree with my own answer. But I think that actually from a consumer's point of view, if people are just talking about how do they move home, whether it's buying and selling homes or whether it's letting homes, actually, if estate agents had no commercial benefit, if it was a service, then actually it would take any sort of the drama and the risk out of it for consumers. The trouble that consumers have is that there are good estate agents and there are bad estate agents, and there are well-behaved estate agents, and there are estate agents that don't behave so well. But it's impossible really for a consumer to identify which are which, apart from Google reviews and that sort of thing. But part of the problem that leads to bad behaviours is that estate agents are making commercial decisions. They're not necessarily making decisions in the best interests of the people who are the clients. And that goes to valuation stage right the way through.
So elaborate, give a few examples. So for instance, someone's watching this, they're a first-time buyer, they've got no experience dealing with estate agents. What are the sort of decisions that an agent might make in their own best interest as opposed to their clients?
Yeah, and this is what I'm saying. You're right to say might make, because in general, some estate agents will do this and some estate agents won't do this. But an estate agent might be tempted, for example, to, when they're going around to value a house and when they hear that there's been 2 estate agents ahead of them, or there's 3 estate agents, or there's lots, and perhaps they know that the client is after the best price possible, they might be very encouraged to offer a price that they don't necessarily really think they're going to be able to achieve, because it gets that client on the market. And people will always question, why would you put a property on the market that you don't think you can sell? And there's various reasons for doing it. There's market share, there's puffing your chest out, there's just getting one over on that estate agent that you just don't like, and you know that they are in as well, so you've got one over on them. And it's the fact that a lot of agents will have a long contract, and they will be able to then work on that client to come down in price to what's potentially the right price in order to sell.
And so let me just in a bit more detail, in case you've got zero experience of the property market, when you go on with a client, when you list your home for sale with an agent, you'll sign a contract. It could be, as Ryan points out, it could be an extended contract. So we now know of agents local in the London area that do 6-month contracts.
Yeah, 26 weeks.
Which is fairly wild. And so you're signed up for 6 months. And so during that time, you can't sell with another agent. And so if they list you at a high price just to win your business, they promise you the world, they will chip away at you until you come down to a more reasonable, saleable price. And you will feel, unfortunately, you feel a bit hoodwinked by that, won't you?
Yeah.
That's the general feeling.
Yeah, you do. Now, I understand that you can't stop estate agents being businesses, but it's a business decision often that leads people doing that.
Yeah.
That is about getting...
It's a commercial decision.
It's a commercial decision, get more properties on. Mm-hmm. It's not stack them high, sell them cheap exactly, but, so I think somebody once said, get them on, get them down, get them gone. And it's It's not a bad business model, and it's a business model. It's not a customer service model, it's a business model. It's about getting the profit through. And when I was in agency, when I was in corporate, semi-corporate agency, it wasn't actually a corporate, I really try and resist bad-mouthing any of my former employers, because I don't mean to. They're businesses, and they're very successful businesses. They sold an awful lot of houses. But my target, if I just talk about my targets as a branch manager, was to list 40 properties a month, and it was to make 20 sales a month. So there were 20 sales there that weren't expected to be sold. We're only targeting 50% of the properties that come on to actually sell and go through. If you look at it in those terms, not the terms that we were looking at it, but as KPIs, that's what we were working on.
And so, let's elaborate on that one sec. KPIs, key performance indicators, and lots of businesses have these targets, these metrics, these key performance indicators. And because of the way the roles are split in a estate agency, you may have listers, which is the person that brings the property to the market, then maybe negotiators that handle maybe viewings, applicants, buyers, sales progressors, a whole load of roles, but everyone has a different target. And we've talked about in previous episodes how that disconnect can perhaps cause issues.
But this was a branch target. I was a branch manager, so that was a branch target. So the branch target was to sell 50% of what came on. Now, my personal target would be to sell more than that, but ultimately to do the job that the business wanted me to do was to make sure that we were getting 20 sales and getting 40 on. So, you know, what happens to the 50% of people who aren't selling? And this is where business and good customer service, you know, what we want a estate agency to be. I think what even most agents I speak to want a estate agency to be better, and they want standards to be higher. I know we talked about this in a previous episode, but business can get in the way. So that's just one example. That's just at valuation stage. Then you've got the pressures you were talking about if you're a first-time buyer. Well, first-time buyer, I think these are the people that we think are vulnerable to things like, for example, conditional selling.
Just elaborate on what conditional selling is, in case people aren't aware.
So conditional selling would be where effectively there's a condition attached to maybe the offer that you're making. I'll tell you, I would like to think it's illegal. I'm not actually sure it's illegal, whether it's just not approved of in the code of conduct that estate agents should adhere to. I have a feeling it is illegal, but I would honestly have to check that out. But for example, let's say you want to make an offer with an estate agent and they say, yes, we'll put that forward, but you must see our mortgage advisor, then that's not allowed. It's not allowed, or maybe that's coercive. Actually, I'm not sure. So unless you see our mortgage advisor, we won't put your offer forward. That's a condition. So the condition is you see our mortgage advisor. The condition, and the condition could be unless you take the mortgage through us. Yeah, well, that's the next layer up, and there's lots and lots of chatter around because recently there's been a lot of chatter because there's a programme recently that sort of shone a light on it a little bit, not in massive detail. No, I don't think it. Yeah, I think it failed to show it actually. In that particular programme that we're talking about. But nevertheless, it's something that I think we all understand goes on and that we don't think should go on. But it's a commercial decision if it's going on.
Well, also, but from what I understand, the commercial decision is that in large agency, corporate agency, without conditional selling, they do not have an estate agency business because the key commercial return comes from the financial services.
It's a financial services business rather than an estate agency business.
And so the estate agency business is simply a lead generator. Yeah. Which is wild.
A funnel.
Wild. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
So we're weaving a little bit off, so you're going to put us right back in. So there's some examples of help me out with my phrasing here.
It's an example of how business can get in the way of good estate agency.
Commercial, that's what I was trying to get to.
And this is what I think. This is where I'm coming. Estate agents are businesses. We do act as businesses. We do want to make profit. But my worry is that it's the commercial interests of operators that can lead people into bad practices. And it can lead an agent into going, I really think you should take that offer, because actually, if you don't take that offer, my business might go bankrupt in a few months' time because my pipeline is looking really low.
And this is why I don't like multi-agent contracts. Because once you've got two agents, they're no longer working for you, they're in competition against the other agent. And it's encouraging someone to maybe not make the best decision. I'm very anti multi-agent contracts. I had a thought that we've sort of we've sort of experienced something that sort of aligns with this concept, though, in that we remove the commercials from the success of the sale. Purplebricks. So they take their fee up front.
Yeah.
And so in simple terms, if you haven't worked with Purplebricks, their model was simply that you would pay your commission up front, and the argument was that they would charge you a lower commission rate, but you'd be saving money. And then, of course, as every consumer assumes, every house sells itself. The issue that we've got there is that they weren't a commercial success. Their success rate wasn't high, even though they didn't have any skin in the game after the sale was.
No, but I think,
but
I think the added problem was, the added problem was they have no skin in the game, so they don't need to sell that house. What they do need to do is list more. So all of their focus goes on to listing and listing, 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 because that's what they then get paid on.
Okay.
I mean, what was the sell-through rate of Purplebricks?
I'm not sure.
I think it was under 50%, or it was around that 50% mark. We'll have to check that before we put
Someone
it in.
will be
there might be some
us.
judicious editing to remove that if it's not the case.
If it's not the case, feel free to comment below. We're not going to push back. Just, but you provide some proof.
But I think that's where the problem comes. Once again, it's a commercial decision then to go out listing and listing and listing, because that's where you're making your money. You're not actually making it on the sale. So people might say, oh, it's great that you only get paid because, if you sell this house. That's brilliant. That's going to work in my interest. But once again, if that's what you need as an agent, it's going to potentially push some agents into going, we need to get this through.
So I can give you another example of a business. I won't say who they are because they're a trading business and they're a small independent in a different area of the country. They don't pay commission to their team. Everyone is on a base salary, and so there's no performance-related incentive. So again, if you're a consumer and you're not familiar, estate agents are generally paid a base salary and some commission for success, whatever their role is. If you're a self-employed agent, the chances are you have no base salary, you're paid on success. So there's a vested interest in getting the sale agreed for the client and getting the sale through to completion. This particular business I'm talking about, none of those incentives, none of those commission rates. The issue they had, though, is that their team, because there's a lack of incentive, they weren't really working that hard to get the sale successfully through. And so if you remove the incentive and the commercials, you also remove some of the drive and the intention.
Yeah.
So how would you combat that?
That's really hard. I mean, it depends, and it's also what the public wants. I mean, there could be, like, conceivably, you could have a model where, because you say it's the public's choice, right, which estate agent they want to use, and whether or not they think it's better that an estate agent's incentivised or not. What if you broke down estate agency into component parts? And we've covered this in probably the first video. What we talk about: are we marketers? Are we advertisers? Are we whatever? But let's say you could have Uber drivers circling around, and somebody needs to book Uber, and they go, right, I want to Uber to St Thomas's Hospital, and then the Uber driver goes, oh yeah, I'll have that, and they click it, and then they go and they take that fare. Like, conceivably, you could have a property business like that. You could have something, especially with AI coming along, that somebody's property search, and I think in a few years we're going to see this, that people are going to be searching, I want a 3-bedroom semi-detached house with a south-facing garden in Chiswick, and AI can scrape the whole of the internet and look for those houses and go, well, here's a few. You won't need Rightmove anymore, for example. So estate agents' websites might become much more important to the future of marketing. So let's imagine that you've got something that could go, okay, I don't necessarily need an estate agent, because the estate agents are talking about professional photography. Well, what if I just, there's something that packages it all up. You go here for your professional photography. You can type in the details of your house here, which is what estate agents are often doing now for their property particulars. Here's an AI description for you. This is the button that puts it on the portals. There you go. Viewings come in. It goes to some operator who goes, oh yeah, I'll take that viewing. It's 20 quid, 25 quid a viewing, whatever. And then maybe there's a sales progression service that you package on. Okay, so conceivably this is a way that you could look at the house selling process. A client could do that, but I'm not sure a client would choose to do that. I'm not sure a client would choose to take that human element of a estate agency out. I mean, maybe some would, and maybe some did. Maybe some did when they were talking about, because I think with Purplebricks that you've mentioned, there was an option that they could do their own viewings, right?
Correct. Yeah, so you could buy a pack of viewing packs.
So you could have a local territory manager do it, or you could just I think maybe for a discounted fee. I don't know whether that's Purplebricks or another one of these models, but you could just do it yourself, and it's even less money to be on the market. But they didn't replace estate agents. Estate agents have still flourished, and they've still, more or less, broadly speaking, been able to still command the fees that they were charging. So I don't think the public does want this removal of estate agents from the operation, from this system. But it's just, how do you remove the conflict of interest? And I think that's where I don't know if it's possible.
It's a really great question, and I would love to get a room full of really experienced agents to debate it and see if there was a way to tweak things. One idea that I spoke to somebody about a couple of weeks ago, Daniel, my business partner, was about. So let me give you some context. In London, did you know that on average 1 in 3 properties that goes to market sells? Only 1 in 3. Right. Which is just wild. That's insane. And so when you start to pick that apart, you start to understand just how bad a job agents are doing. You can't blame the consumer for this. If agents are willing to list a property and accept that 2 out of 3 are not going to sell, you've got to take some ownership on that. That's got to be on you. Now, there is a cultural issue in London in that you've got 1/3 of all estate agents in this country are based in the M25. So that's a lot of agents in a small territory. And there's a lot of housing, of course, it's densely populated, but there's a lot of fighting over getting the sellable stock because of that. And the sheer volume of corporate agents in London who, and this sounds derogatory and perhaps it is, but corporate agents is a little bit of a revolving door, it can be. Got a lot of young agents that are trying to cut their teeth in corporate, and so because of that lack of experience means that they're just not ready to deliver great service yet because they haven't got there yet. Yeah. And so that combination of a lot of agents that don't necessarily have the understanding, and the London consumer, which, let me be clear, I'm a London consumer, we're a tricky bunch. It forces up pricing. It mismanages pricing. It means we end up listing properties. All the pricing is just wild, and that's why 2 out of 3 don't sell, because whether it's bad agency, whether it's bad marketing, whether it's lack of advertising, if the price is way off, it's not going to go. So when you pick all these things apart and you try and work out what's the solution, how do we get to a point where, I mean, Scotland have got a great solution. Their sales success rate is somewhere near 90%.
Because they're auctioneers.
Well, to an extent, there is closer to an auctioneer, but it's a locked-in pricing. So they survey the property before it goes to market, and the price is based on a survey as opposed to a valuation by an estate agent. It's much more professional, if you like, and so the property comes to the market at the right price. And when a sale is agreed, in essence it's locked in. Not exactly, but it's more locked in than the amount of fall-throughs we have. So who is the surveyor? So the surveyor is an independent valuer, you mean? So it gets independently valued, or it gets valued by somebody who's qualified in that firm? Yes. Okay. And so there's the qualification piece. Yeah, but that's a conflict of interest as well, though, isn't it? Well, I don't know, because if you look at their data, Scotland's data is the best in the UK by a very, very long way. But what's the metric? What are you measuring that on? Sales success. I'm looking at all the different regions in the UK, and Scotland always performs strongest. Yes, but their prices are way lower than they are in London. So it depends what you're basing success on, right? It depends what does the consumer want? What do sellers want? You've said I don't know if it's in this episode or a previous one, that often you'll get to the sofa and the question is, what's important to you, and they will say 90% of the time, I want the highest price possible in the shortest space of time. Yeah. So I'm not saying that Scotland's wrong, but I am wondering if you were going to ask, I mean, they're paying for this valuation presumably, so they're choosing one firm. So I won't pretend that I'm an absolute expert. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they are paying for it, maybe they're not. I'm not sure. But they won't pay 3 firms. But I do wonder if that's part of this. Break it down into constituent parts of this process. Maybe there should be effectively like a valuation service. You go and get your house valued, and then you pick your agent. And then the agents are their job is marketing. And this was what we were talking about in the first episode: is what is the job of an estate agent? And they are effectively they're not. I think the one job they aren't is valuers. It's the one job I would say an estate agent isn't. Is a valuer. Why? Because they're guides, but they're not saying that property's worth this. Because if they're saying that, it can't sell for more than that. And actually, in Scotland, what they tend to do is do offers in excess of.
So buyers actually end up setting what that price is. That's why. And I had a feeling in Scotland they by and large call themselves auctioneers rather than estate agents, or certainly they did used to in the past.
So there's a quite a large business in Scotland which I spent some time with, although that was maybe 10 years ago, and this was all an eye-opener for me. It blew my mind. Wow, how can we incorporate this south of the border? This sounds wonderful. Estate agents that are familiar with Scottish practices often talk about we should look at what they do and bring it down here, because the simple metric of listings to completions is so much stronger there.
Yeah.
And this particular business, who I think was arguably the original Purplebricks, he had agents all across the country and set it up in this way, but he would have the property valued in the appropriate way, and then would still try and outperform the valuation and get buyers to pay above it. So it's not a case of, this is the price and it's non-negotiable. Great agents can still outperform that pricing strategy, but his model was actually, his very clever model was, you can sell your home with us for free. And they said, oh, well, how do we do that? Well, so your home is worth £300,000. Our fees are 2%. We're going to sell it for £306,000. And so, your 2% fee is covered by the price we'll achieve for you. And I know nowadays that sort of messaging has been done. People have heard it. But 10 years ago, that was pretty cool. That was pretty clever. It was a good message for drawing people into his agency to have a conversation. And then he was, it was all, the professional surveying side that got the valuation made sense. But where I want to come back to, and I started talking about in Scotland, but actually what I want to come back to in terms of a solution, is where we landed in our conversation was, if you remove long-term contracts, it completely changes the consumer's journey and what they have to tolerate.
In a way, I removed long-term, when I had my agency, I had no contract. And I never lost any customer. I've lost a few, obviously, but I hardly ever lost a customer. So, I mean, I agree. But what it took away is this sense of risk from a client. But it didn't mean that they thought that they should leave. So, but I think what you're saying is it sort of stops the malpractice. It stops you having this. Okay, I'm going to stick you on for 600,000. I know I'm only going to sell you for 475,000. In the meantime, I'll bring you down by £25,000 4 times over the next 6 months. That's kind of.
What I think it does is it would take time to work its way through, but eventually, if my view is that example, 600,000, I'm going to sell for 425. It takes me 6 months to get the price down. If I have that conversation with you, the consumer, several times, you're going to say, no, that's enough of that.
Yeah.
Not
I
that
understand
nonsense.
what you're saying. Yeah.
And so in a few waves of property cycles, eventually the agent realises, well, this isn't going to work anymore. We're not going to sell any properties. We're not going to make any money. We better start telling the truth about the property value. And I think it cleans everything up. So we genuinely had a conversation about a month ago over dinner that should we start a petition to ban agency contracts that are longer than 4 weeks? Because that could, 4 weeks with a 7-day notice period, not a 3-month notice, not a 1-month notice. If you're only ever at best 5 weeks away from losing a client, but as a worst case scenario, you could lose a client in 8 days. Do you start to behave yourself? I really think people would. I really think this could make a huge, huge impact.
So, well, yeah, especially if you have got your skin in the game as an agent. If it's your marketing costs, if it's your marketing expense. A lot of agents are charging clients for the marketing. So actually, it's kind of doesn't matter if they do bugger off after 5 weeks.
Say that though, but I think it. So let's just. I would say that if you move to that model, if somehow we could turn the entire UK into a 1-month contract, 7-day 7-day notice period, I think it would be fair for agents to charge for marketing upfront, a marketing contribution. But you say it doesn't matter if they don't sell it, but if they stop selling homes, they stop making money. So whilst they might be, they might be net zero on that particular property because they haven't actually paid for the marketing, they're not making the commission from it. But they are paying for the personnel to be in the room trying to sell it. So they're going to be moving backwards. So, it's interesting, your thought process and how you answered the initial question. What's the one thing that tomorrow you would change about how we operate? And I've been thinking about it, but from a different standing for the last few weeks. And I think it would make a huge impact. Let me ask you though, what's the downside to doing that from a consumer perspective or an agent perspective? If everyone had to move to 4-week contracts, are there any negatives you can think of? Because you've run it in your own business for years, even shorter contract term.
Yeah, what is the downside? I suppose the downside would be, I mean, what you don't get with agents with long contracts. So I never bothered canvassing a particular agent at a 26-week sole agency agreement. So I would just think, what's the point? And what is the point? And actually, if I would come back to Chris Watkin again. We mentioned him in another episode, and he is the man of the stats. But he had a stat recently that I think it was a 20 EA stat, so he pulled it from a very reputable data aggregator, and it said that, I can't remember what his stat was now, but it's something like 9 out of 10 or more will sell with the first agent. So you kind of thought, God, what's the point of canvassing now?
We should quantify that though. 9 out of 10 that actually sell.
Yeah. Okay.
So if 50% sell, it means 9 out of 20 sell with agent number 1.
And then they just don't
and
bother.
1 out of 20 sells with another agent, and 10 out of 20 don't sell at all.
Yeah.
Which makes it even more sort of shocking, I think. And that's interesting because pre-COVID, roughly 60 to 70% of properties were selling for agent number 2, and that's completely
flipped.
Yeah, which in my own business, in our estate agency business here, I find that hard to believe because we're brought in as sort of first choice, second agent quite a lot of the time, and we get success from those properties. Yeah. I think we take the marketing seriously, we take the customer care seriously, and we talk about strategy as opposed to, oh yeah, let's just throw it on and see what happens. Yeah.
So anyway, you were asking about what the downside is. I mean, there isn't. I don't know whether there is any downsides really. I can't think of any. But the downside potentially from a consumer point of view is you're going to suddenly get bombarded a lot more frequently with over-promising canvassing literature saying, you still haven't sold after 2 weeks. I think we should have a conversation.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you're right. But I mean,
I'm not sure whether
it's a worthwhile.
I'm not sure whether it's bad for the consumer or not, though. Yeah. Is it really a downside?
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
Yeah. Okay. This is interesting. We've stayed on subject.
For twice in a row.
So yeah, this is
2 weeks in a row.
Amazing. 2 weeks.
And I came back in the same
and
clothes.
Yeah, you've
2 weeks in a row.
We've got to get you out of that caravan and get you back into your wardrobe. Okay, guys, look, if you've liked this, even if you haven't, just pretend and hit that like button, share, follow, engage. Whatever you can see underneath this video, or maybe it's above the video because I don't know where this is being posted. Bit of engagement is good for us. If you disagree with anything we said,
even I disagree with what I'm saying, by the way.
Oh,
I absolutely disagree. I don't think we should decommercialise estate agency.
Call him out if he wants to play the lunatic card and show up with something that he completely disagrees with. Then call that out. Rowan, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me again.
Well, as always, you're right up there in my list of top 19 agents I'd like to have come on the show. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we will see you next week. I will see you next week. Rowan probably won't.